Oh, this is such a good one today. We are live, we're recording. Um, this is all part of the series that I'm doing on generating conversations and creating clients inspired by my time in AJC, the Ankush Jain Coaching Career School. And we have a special member here today named Nathaniel, and he has just been amazing to get to know through the school. And so I'm excited for us to open up this conversation in terms of what you've found helpful in your own journey in terms of creating clients, filling a practice, and yeah, just what you found most useful. So anyone listening can really run with some of these ideas and principles in their own practice or in their own business. So Nathaniel, but let's start out. I'll have you introduce yourself and just who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here having this conversation with you. So I've been coaching full time for 6 years now, and I was coaching for a few years in the run up to that. I was working part time while I built my practice, and I've been doing a few things in that time. I've been doing a lot of one on one work. I've created quite a few different groups over the years, from 6 month online group programs to 5 day in-person events. I've run a lot of men's groups. I've done some work inside organisations, and I also spent quite a few years. I'm not doing this now, but I did spend quite a few years working with an organisation that supports military veterans and emergency services staff. So people who are, have experienced some really difficult stuff and still are. And so you might consider that more sort of mental health work than coaching, but for me it was the same kind of thing, the same skills and the same understandings. So I've been doing lots of different things. Where I'm at right now is I'm really focused on my one-on-one practice. I'm working with predominantly business owners, founders, CEOs, got some clients inside bigger organizations as well, and also working with people who are starting out on that journey, who are creating their first business or their next venture. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Wow, excellent. I love it. You are quite the powerhouse, right? Even from just sharing that such a variety of background and experience in the way that you have served people and the way that you show up. So, you've been doing this for, you know, so many years now, and it's been in different contexts. Some of it's been one-on-one, some of it's been group. And I'm hearing that there's been all different types of people that you serve. Sometimes people are beginning, sometimes they're a CEO. If someone's listening to this conversation, they're coming from the context of that it's a series on generating conversations, creating clients. What have you found most helpful for yourself in terms of, if you were starting a practice or wanting to fill the practice, what have you found helpful for yourself in terms of, where to begin or where to start with that?
Mm. Oh man, there's so many different factors to it, and I was thinking about this in the run up to this conversation. I can't say that I've got a perfect system. I think what has really helped is to be honest about where I'm at and what I'm doing. For you to tell people. I
Hmm.
found I had one of those Facebook memories pop up a few weeks ago, from however many years ago it was, and it was me putting the call out to my Facebook community saying, because I first went into this through NLP. I started learning NLP to help me with my own anxiety, really, and I learnt it, and I was practicing it, and it was really helping me. And then I thought, okay, maybe there's something here for me to help other people. And I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a coach, but I thought, well, it would at least be worth testing. I'd like to experiment and see if it's for me or not. And I put the call out publicly saying, I've been learning this thing called NLP, and it's really helped me with my own state of mind. And it's also been really helpful for helping people figure out what they want and what's important to them and what's getting in their way. And here's how it can help. I'm seeking to learn and practice. If you want a conversation, hit me up. And I remember being so terrified to post that, but I did post it, and I got a bunch of conversations out of that. And so I think there's something really powerful about saying where you're at and what you're doing, and that's still relevant right now for me, even several years later. Like, there's something really important about saying what it is. Who do you want to talk to right now? Because for me, it's different than it was back then. Like, I'm really looking to work with people who are making a positive impact in the world, and the more I'm willing to actually speak that, whether that's online, or in a public forum, or just with a friend, or however the context comes up, but being willing to actually express it and own it and say, here's what I'm up to and here's what I'm looking for. That's, otherwise, how do people know? So
Right.
I think there's something really foundational about that. I've definitely struggled to do that in the past, and started coaching, and then I'm going, well, where's all the clients? Thinking that the moment you say, hey, I'm a coach, now everyone's going to come. That's not how it works. You've got to actually be telling people what you're doing, and be willing to put it out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think this is so good because just as you're describing, right? Whether it's starting out on the journey, or maybe there's this place where you notice that perhaps you're just in a different space, and maybe you're wanting to work with a different type of client, or there's something that you're skilled in now that you weren't then. This whole idea of being able to put that out there,
mm,
and like you said, even though you were nervous, to be able to share that, because how is anybody going to know? And you could say, I'm a coach, but people might be wondering, well, what is that? Or what kind of coach are you? And so I love just really how you're sharing, to share with others what you're up to put that out there, to be willing to have a conversation about it, because whether it was, the anxiousness and NLP, or uh, could be 6 months later or a year later, there's something, especially in the coaching world, where there's continual growth. It's almost as though we're always up to something, and when we don't share that, people have no idea. And so I think that is phenomenal. And I recognize it looks like there was something else maybe you were going to say, but I just wanted to reflect that out for anyone listening, of
yeah,
just how important that is. But yeah, I'll turn it back to you.
yeah. Otherwise, no one knows. You can be the best
Mhm.
kept secret, and people don't know. I think the other thing, and it kind of comes off the back of this, and you kind of alluded to it. You could talk about it through the lens of using the word "I'm a coach" or "I'm coaching." My experience with that is that's not normally a very helpful way to do it, because most people have got no clue what coaching is. We're in a completely unregulated industry. There's lots of different people doing lots of different things and calling it coaching. And some of it, as you know, is utterly life changing and transformational and incredible, world changing. And some of it is really not, and it's actually really not that good. And it's the opposite. And but it's all lumped into the same bucket of coaching. And most people, I think it's different for us because we're in these circles where you've kind of already bought into the idea. You've probably had some coaching yourself. You get it, and you know the value of it, and it makes sense to be talking about it. But for most people, they haven't had that experience, and so they don't really know what it is. And you say, "Oh, I'm a coach," or "I'm doing some coaching. Do you want an experience of it?" And they go, "Oh, my friend had some coaching a couple of years ago," and that's what, and they immediately assume that you do whatever their reference for it is, which may be a million miles away from what you do. So I think I don't even use the word coach really these days. I
Mhm.
try to avoid it. I think talking about, or being willing to be open and upfront about where you can help someone, that's very different. So for me, like I've done loads of groups over the years, and I used to do. I ran a group for, I don't know, 6 times maybe, that I called Create Your Future. And the whole idea of it was, you've got some kind of idea about what's next. You haven't made it happen yet. let's figure out what it is. Let's get really clear on what it is. Get some clarity. Then figure out what's getting in the way of that and deal. Bring it to the surface, whatever the barriers are that you're facing, and then let's get into action and start making it happen. And so I would go and invite people to that, and I wouldn't say, "Hey, come and do some coaching with me." I'd say, I'd have been talking to people and obviously got a sense that they were the right person or not, or would be a good fit for them. And I'd reach out to them and say, I know that you're thinking about starting this business. I'm doing this program where I'm helping people like you to do this, this, and this. And so we didn't even talk about coaching really, but it was more about where are you at, what are you stuck with, and being explicit, like I can help you with that. And that for me has been a real edge, I think, over the years, like being willing to own it and say, I can look you in the eye and hand on heart, no, I can definitely help you and I want to help you. Like being willing to actually do that. And that's really what I'm focused on now in my one-on-one practice, for example. I've been having a few messages back and forth with someone over the last couple of months. We've had a couple of conversations. She sent me a message today and she's talking about what she wants to do in this next phase of her life. And that's what I said. I don't know if you know, but I help people with that. And I can help you. And if you want to, we can have a conversation. And it was very kind of non-committal. It wasn't like you must talk to me or I'm going to save your life. It wasn't that kind of energy. It was very easy and gentle and welcoming, but it was also very clear and honest and direct. And it was a very clear invitation. So I think that, having people knowing what you're up to, but also being willing to actually invite people in and offer them a hand. Do you want some help? Would you like some help? Those two things together, however they show up, whatever medium or whatever forums you're in, if you're doing those two things, you're likely to get into some conversations.
Wow. Yeah, and I love that you pointed that out about the coaching, right? Because in some ways it's almost, that idea of, I had interviewed Julie, and there's something that she said that I really liked. She said, she says, "Where's the needle pointing? Is the needle pointing at us, or is it pointing at other people?" And I love how you shared that, of not even having to say I'm a coach or anything like that, because we may be making it about us. Whereas, what I'm hearing through what you're sharing is the real focus is on hearing what's happening for other people. So the focus is on them, right? And what it is that they're really wanting, what they're wanting to create.
Mm.
And when you notice that you can help them, really being clear and complete about that you can help them, and making that invitation, not with pressure, but almost just for clarity for the both of you, so they're informed and then they get to make the choice. Do I have that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And really owning it. Because I heard that years ago and started doing it, but I was doing it from the place of like, oh, like, I'm a bit awkward about this, and I could possibly help you with that, and like feeling really uncomfortable about it, and not really. I was saying maybe the right things, or I was taking the step, but the being side of it, where I was coming from, was not in full alignment with it. Especially if it was someone who I felt was more successful than me or more important to me. I've had that kind of imposter syndrome. And so I might still make the invitation, but it would be really awkward and I would feel really awkward. And it's like I'm saying it, but I don't want to be saying it in the same moment. And that it's just sort of, it's not aligned when you communicate like that. So there's something really powerful about, and this is where the self work comes in, like knowing that you can help or not, and making sure that you can, right? You've obviously got to do the work, you've got to do the reps, you've got to actually be able to help. Don't offer to help if you can't actually help them. But yeah, being connected to your value and your ability to impact someone, I think that's such a powerful thing because people feel that. That's more important than the words. People kind of know.
Right. Yeah. Now, if somebody was caught up in this, right? Because I love that you're saying to own it, and you're also you also talked about how maybe you weren't owning it as much in the past, or was a little bit of, wishy-washy. What what helped you own it? Because I almost, what I'm hearing, and this is kind of my take, and what I've noticed is, when maybe in the past, if I've had an experience where I'm not quite owning it, it's almost as though I've been anticipating, is it a yes or a no from this person, and sort of caught up maybe in that conversation. And when I shifted to owning it personally, it was less about whether they were interested or not, and more about the clarity of the communication of, I have an ability, or I have a skill in this. Just as if someone was looking for firewood, if if someone sells firewood, they're going, yeah, I have firewood,
Mm.
right? They know that, they understand that. And so I think with coaching, there might be these different questions that come up for someone. What helped you just have such clarity around owning that you could help someone?
Clocking up the reps,
Hmm.
hands down. I think, people come out of a coaching program, or they've been on the receiving end of a powerful coaching experience, and they're sold on the idea, and they might have, some foundational understanding. They might have a few ideas, but if they haven't really done it that much, it's kind of untested. And I think the best thing anyone can do, and this is true for whatever phase of the journey you're in, is just be coaching, just be doing it, just be helping people as much as possible all the time. When you've helped enough people, there comes a point. I remember listening to Jamie Smart years ago. He was one of my very first influences, and still a huge influence for me. And I remember listening to him on one of the recordings that he had done, where he was talking to a client of his who was a coach, and they were talking about coaching someone who they felt uncomfortable to talk to. And they said, well, I remember Jamie saying to them, "You need to be able to look them in the eye and know that you can help them, because when you know, they will know." And
Mm.
I remember hearing that and being like, I kind of get it, but I don't really get it. Like, it was a bit abstract. I'm going, what's the criteria here? Like, I needed some kind of something more than that. It felt very vague to me. But there is a point where that happens, where there's just like a level of grounded certainty in you that I think you can only really get from, spending hours, tens, hundreds, thousands of hours in conversation with people. And so for anyone, I think the sooner that you're doing that, the better. And if you don't feel that, if you don't feel that level of confidence yet, the best thing you can do is just be in conversation with people. Do it for free, do it for whatever you need to do it for, do it with your colleagues, do it with whoever's open to doing it, do it with permission. Don't just coach people without permission. But that's where that real grounded certainty will come from. Because I've
Wow.
seen people, I've seen it within the being community too, where people have really focused on who they're being, and had this like real boldness and directness, and like what looks like confidence, but actually without much experience coaching. So they can kind of portray this, I've got this, but actually people feel it if it
Hmm.
if it's not really there, that sort of knowing.
Yeah. Wow. And so the way in which for them to own that is to continually coach, and to offer that, and to be clear about that. Um, I imagine a question that might come up for somebody listening is, they might have a strong, let's say they have a strong skill set, a strong ability, and they're owning it. Is a part of that process being, in conversation with them, to ask the right questions for maybe their own knowing that, yes, I can help this person, versus someone who might be, I'm thinking there's someone who might have a challenge, but maybe they're not as coachable, or they're not as open
Yeah.
yet. But they have a knowing that I can help with this thing,
Mm.
but can I help this person versus another person who might be more open and willing? Is that, part of your process of knowing and clear communication to sort of ask some clarifying questions?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's an essential part of any enrollment.
Yeah.
Your or mine or whoever's level of trust in your own ability to help, for example, that's one part of the equation, but it's a bigger equation. There's someone else in this relationship, and there's a few factors like are they coachable? Are they open minded? Are they willing to be honest and be vulnerable? Are they willing to say where things are really at? Are they willing to hear new ideas? Are they willing to take action and actually test things out in the world? There's a coachability question, and they're the kind of couple of factors how I define coachability. But so that definitely needs to be tested. I've worked with clients before where I haven't thoroughly tested that up front, and I've assumed that because someone is willing to pay, that has demonstrated a level of coachability and commitment, and that hasn't necessarily been the case. And once we've been several conversations in, and maybe we've got to a sticking point, and we've got to, the real growth needing them to look at something that maybe is uncomfortable for them, if they're not really up for it and they're not really ready for it, and we haven't talked about what's going to happen when they reach that point, and they're not necessarily coachable, that can be when they back away. And I've had that experience. So I think that's a really important part of enrollment. The other thing for me, which is also essential actually in my enrollment process now, is, do I want to coach them? Just because someone's coachable and just because I've got the ability to coach them doesn't mean I want to do it. What are they trying to do? What are they seeking to create in the world? What are the outcomes that they want some help with? Because I may not be aligned with that, or it might be in conflict with my values, for example. So I think there's a few factors to good enrollment that to have a really powerful coaching partnership. I really like Rich Litvin's metaphor about this, that coaching's a 200% model. I need to show up 100%, but you as the coachee need to do that too. And when that happens, then a magic can happen. But if one or other of those isn't there, or isn't at that level, the possibilities are way less than what could be there.
Right. And what are the ways that, I imagine you've experimented with this in different ways over the years. you know I'm just thinking if someone's listening to this and it's occurring to them that, not only to ask the clarifying questions, but what are the ways that you test if somebody is coachable, or that they might be a good fit for your coaching? I'm curious, just what are some things that you do in the enrollment process, or questions that you might ask that help illuminate that for you?
Yeah. For me, it's really been a result of slowing it right down. So if someone comes to me and they say, right, I'm looking for coaching, or I think you might be able to help me, they're usually coming in with like, how does it work? What do you charge? They want all logistical questions. And so these sort of, the immediate response might be, oh, well, it looks like this and it looks like that. But I'm the opposite now. I'm like, we're not having that conversation now. I don't know. There's lots of different ways we can do it. And I've got some criteria too. And we're not at the point where that conversation makes sense. So what I would always suggest to people is that I'd usually have some kind of, shorter intake conversation, just a chat, hear where they're at, what they're struggling with, what it is that they want to create, just to see if we've got a good vibe, see if you can tell a lot from someone just from a single conversation. Are they even listening to you? I've had conversations with people like that where they're just talking over you the whole time. And every time, the moment I try and speak, they're finishing my sentence and things. I'm thinking, this is probably not going to be a great relationship, and we can cut it off at that point. So for me, it's been slowing down, having that kind of an initial conversation, and then if it makes sense, to offer them some more time, and to always, always, always give them something to do. Set them a challenge, whether it's listen to an audio or read something or to do something sometimes, go and actually like a little exercise, a little challenge for them, and give them enough time to do it, but have it so that they actually have to do something and then see what happens. Because if they come back and they haven't done it, that's a pretty good indication of where they're at. Or they come back and they say, oh, I was too busy, or I didn't have time, or whatever. Some people, within a couple of days, they're sending you feedback going, oh, I read that thing and this is what came up for me. And, that having them demonstrate their willingness to engage in the process, that is essential. And for me now, I remember getting this feedback from Kush years ago. It's when I first started doing this. I was working part-time in a business development role while I was building up my coaching practice. So I had in my head, like, how many doors are you knocking, and what's the sales process? And, within 2 conversations, I want to be making a proposal, and like really like heavy sort of sales process bringing to it. And he said, I remember him saying to me, just stop proposing. And I was thinking, what? That sounds so counterintuitive. Like, surely I need to make proposals. And he said, just to test it as an experiment, just stop proposing. And so all I was doing was spending time with someone, coaching them as best as I could. At the end of that conversation, always giving them something to do, setting them a challenge or whatever, and asking, should we talk again? And that was it. And I was like, but holding my tongue, like, don't try and force this. And at some point, it was like the energy would flip, and they'd be saying to me, this is great, what do we do? Like, how do I pay you for this? Or I feel like I need to pay you some money for this. Like, well, how does this work? And so they demonstrated their coachability by that point. And they'd also, you weren't selling them on the concept, but they'd had a few conversations. It had already helped them. They'd had some insights and realizations, but they'd also had some outcomes and shifts and tangible results. And all of a sudden, the whole dynamic was different. It's not like, hey, I'm here to pitch you on something. It's like they get it, and they've proved it. And then, then it's a very different conversation.
Yeah. I think this ties perfectly into where we began here, right? Of really listening for where, what's happening for people, sharing that you can help them. And what I'm hearing from you saying, right, this idea of stop proposing, it really kept you in a place of being of service.
Mm.
And through that process, you noticed that the energy shifted, where you were able to really recognize, is someone coachable? Do you enjoy working with them? And from that, because they really got to experience it, they were able to choose for themselves to say, hey, I want to continue with this, or I want to be more committed to this.
Yeah.
How do we do that? That then the conversation naturally flowed from that place, because
Mm.
they were opting in rather than you proposing it. Do
Yeah.
I have that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think
And
that comes from another thing that we haven't said explicitly, but we probably alluded to, and that's definitely been a huge shift in my thinking over the years, is to always be serving, to always be doing something that is of value for someone somewhere, not necessarily to try and get them into a conversation right now. And you might not even, they might not be ready for that conversation at that point, or I might not want it, I might not have space for it at that point. But being of service as a habit, as a ritual, as a way of being, because that then, when you're doing that and you're doing that consistently, there's a bunch of people who I'm working with. I was looking down my client list before this call. There's people there who I work with who I'd done loads of stuff to help them before we ever had a formal conversation about coaching. I'd sent them stuff, I'd maybe written a post that was relevant to them and tagged them in it, or I'd shared a perspective, or I'd had a chat with them, or whatever. There'd been a bunch of there'd been energy going out from me to them already, and service, 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 without an agenda, without trying to get them to do anything. And at some point, either they've wanted to talk, or I might have something like a group that I'm filling, or a space, or they've responded to something that I've sent them, and I've gone, okay, I feel like it's the right thing now for me and for them to invite them into a conversation. And at that point, the context is kind of already there. There's already a felt experience of, this person's been helping me. This person is a helpful force in my life. That's such a foundational thing that may lead to an immediate conversation, but it may lead to a conversation down the line. I talked to a guy today who is in Australia, and he's a kung fu buddy of mine. I used to train with this guy years ago, and I've been back in the UK for 6 years, so I've not seen him for more than 6 years. And I'm not even sure how we started messaging in the last week or two, but he has in the last year had suffered a series of panic attacks, and he'd never had that happen to him before, and it's really freaked him out. And I've experienced that too. And so I sent him some stuff. I sent him an audio that I made about anxiety, and he listened to it. And I sent him a couple of other things, and I said, "Do you want to have a chat?" And he said, "Yeah." And I talked to him today, and he was saying, "Oh, when we talked back in Australia, and you did this, and you sent me that," and I couldn't even remember it. Like I'd actually been to his house and had a sit down with him and his wife, and was helping them with some stuff about their business, and I had completely forgotten that I'd even done that, because it wasn't like trying to set up a client. It was just a mate of mine from the Kung Fu school who had a struggle, and they live around the corner from me. So I went over and we had a cup of tea and I helped him. I'd sent him a book. There's a bunch of things that I'd just completely forgotten about, because it wasn't a client getting thing. It was just being of service. And now he's saying to me, I'm 45 years old and I'm having panic attacks, and I really need to sort this out. And I'm an obvious person for him to talk to now, because there's that relationship's been building for years, but not because I've been manipulating him for years to be a client. That's just not how it's unfolded at all. So that was a real beautiful reminder for me today, because he's telling me that, and it's reminding me, and I think that shift. I remember first reading The Prosperous Coach years ago and really thinking of it as a formula, not thinking of it, not really getting it as just a way of being in the world. It was like, I'm going to give you something to get something back. I'm going to offer you this resource, hope that you're going to do something in return. And I think when that shifted for me, that just makes the whole thing a lot easier, because you can just be in service whenever you've got time and just be helpful, and you never really know when that's going to come back to you.
Right. Now, thank you so much for sharing those real life stories, because I think it really shows what service gets to really look like. And there's something interesting that you said, right? Is instead of trying to get the client, that you focused on service and building the relationship, and that that it felt different for you. What I think that's a natural thing that people experience of, I'd really like a client and I'm hearing about service, so I'm gonna share material with them. What helped create that energetic shift that really allowed you to feel free to build the relationship without energetically needing them to become a client?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious where that shift happened for you, or what, if someone's listening, what you might advise them now
Mm.
that they have an awareness around it.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's like one point where it happened. I think it's an ongoing thing,
Yeah.
because feeling needy is a moment to moment thing, isn't it? It's an emotion. For me, I think there's two big things. One is very practical, and one's much more intangible, but just as important. I think practically, one of the things that's really helped me is to put myself in a position where I don't need a client. I
Mhm.
don't need the client to pay my bills that month.
Yeah.
Initially, that was working part time while I built up the practice, and since then it's been making sure I've always got a buffer. And this year I've been experimenting a lot more with putting clients on payment plans. So rather than just having an upfront fee, still having that as an option, but having monthly payments as an option. So and that's a relatively recent thing for me that I've been experimenting with. But that has meant that like now I've got a bunch of payments that I know are coming. So I don't actually need to create a client. I think that's so important because you can do all the internal energetic work you want, but if you actually really need the money that month, even if you say all the right things and you've done all of the a textbook enrollment, whatever that means for you, if you're still giving off that energy, it's like a bad smell. Like people get it and they feel it and they don't like it. So I think that's a very practical thing. The other aspect of it is the inner aspect of it is doing the work to make sure that you don't need it on an emotional level, or that you don't need it on an egoic level. That you don't need the validation, if that's what it is for you. It's not the same thing for everybody, but often people they think that they need the yes, whether that's in a coaching conversation or whether they're asking someone out or whether it's in some other, they're asking for help or something like that. Often people are so attached to getting a yes, because they think if they don't, then whatever, they're failing or they're not good enough or that person doesn't respect me or whatever the story is that you've got. Most people have got some version of that, and I definitely did, and I still do sometimes. So that for me has been a process of really unpacking all those stories. And for me, it was all about self-worth. It was all about validation. It was all about, do people see me as successful and all that kind of stuff. So there's a focus on that that's maybe outside of the context of that particular conversation. But I have a ritual now, which I always do in any enrollment, certainly at the point of the proposal, at the point where I'm actually speaking fees. And normally, sometimes that the proposal conversation is the same conversation where they would decide. Often it's a second conversation, or which might be a fifth or a sixth conversation in the whole enrollment. But sometimes it's a different conversation where you make a proposal and then they come back and say what they want to do. But definitely in those conversations, immediately before those conversations, I will go in on myself. Sometimes I'll speak it. Sometimes I'll write it down and just be like, I don't need this. I don't need them as a client. I don't need their money. And just to kind of remind myself of that and connect to it. And I might really want it. I'm kind of simultaneously dialing down my neediness and reminding myself that I don't need it, and also dialing up my desire, because I might really want to work with them. And if I do, I probably want to tell them that, not from a place of like, oh, please work with me, but from a place of like, you're doing something amazing and I'm inspired by you and I can definitely help you and I want to help you and I want to be able to tell you that. So there's a dialing up of the desire, but making sure that there's no neediness. And that's like a very deliberate, conscious process for me. I always do it now. And it helps a lot because it just takes that pressure off, takes that kind of, get kind of energy off. It just removes it. And then you can
Yeah.
be in that conversation and be really honest and direct and honest and powerful and, you know, forthright, let's say. You can tell someone, if it makes sense, you can say, we really need to do this. I think this is really important, and be completely unattached at the same time. And that's attractive to someone. That energy is really powerful for someone.
Yeah. This is so powerful because coaches are in all different places in their journey, like you were saying, and I love how you paired the two around the practicality and the energetics, right? Of making sure that financially you're set, so you don't need that client, so there isn't a neediness, and the other piece to this, which is the internal sense, right? Because I've worked with people that they could have thousands of dollars in savings, and maybe they've gone into coaching or they've made a career shift, and they're there may be that piece where the money is there and they don't need that client, and that emotional part that you're talking about of, if somebody says no, what are they making that mean, or whatever might be coming up for them. Everyone has their sort of unique flavor in the process. And I also love how you shared, because I recognize it in myself and others, that there are moments that appear in the journey where something may still, pop up where maybe we really would like to work with someone. And so I love how you're separating the two, where you're recognizing I'm still good, I'm complete, I'm whole, whether this person is working with me or not. And there can also be the truth of, I really desire to work with this person, or this would be one of my favorite things that we could work on, without it having that neediness behind it. So thank you so much for sharing that practice as well that you do, because I think it's also neat that you do it, even if it's writing it down for yourself before the proposal. It
Yeah,
sounds like, is that right?
yeah. I really do think of it as a practice. It's not some kind of one-off insight that, oh, now I'm free and I don't need anything from anyone and I shall forevermore be free. Like, it doesn't often work like that. You might feel like that and you might feel like that for ages, and then something happens that could be completely unrelated. Something happens in your life, or you have an unexpected financial stress, or you know you're in a tricky situation, or you just haven't had enough sleep that day, and for whatever reason, in that moment, you starting to get back into these needy patterns. It's not linear. It comes and it goes. So I think for us, I mean, this is the work we're helping other people with, right? It's helping them to, be less constrained by whatever baggage they've got in the moment. We have to do that too. It's just as important for us as it is for our clients. I think a lot of coaches forget that, I think, and they think, oh yeah, I get it. I got it because I learned it, or someone told me, or I heard it on that podcast, or I read it in that book, and so I know it. And actually, in the moment, they're not actually being that. And so, for me, I really do see a lot of this as a practice. It's rituals that we need to do on a regular basis. So you have to do the work on yourself in order to be able to be that for someone else.
Yeah. Wow, I'm loving this. Um, and I'm mindful of our time. And what would you I guess what would you like to, for any of the listeners, what would you like to leave them with, as they've gone on this journey with us here in this conversation, and they have this awareness now around, really making sure that they're hearing what's happening for people, they're speaking to that, not making it about them. They're um, really being of service. They're focusing on building the relationship rather than just trying to get the client. And thank you so much for sharing the variety of ways that you've built relationships with different people, and the way that you've served. Um, what would you like to leave them with, or what would you like them to know, as we wind down this conversation?
I look out into the world and I see that this work of connecting with people and helping them to understand themselves and helping them to find peace and helping them to figure out who they are and what they want and helping them to actually create what they want is so needed. It is so needed in the world. The world is crying out for real, true transformative work. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think the need for that in the world, in the Western world, definitely is increasing. So I feel like we have, if we choose to, we have a responsibility here to get out of our own way and to be that for people. And if you want to play that game and if you want to make that choice, then the the only way you can do that well and to do that to the best of your ability is to do what you need to do for yourself. You need to do the work on yourself. You need to understand what is it about this that I'm finding uncomfortable or difficult, and then go and figure it out. Either get some help. You know, we're connected through a school. I'm years into my practice, and I'm back at school because I know that there's always more to learn. You know, there's ways to do it like that. There's lots of other ways that require less investment of time and money, but there's ways to do it, and it's on us to do that work and to make peace with ourselves and to get good at this. Because at the end of the day, if you want to do this as a business, you've got to figure out the business side of it. You can be the best coach in the world, but if you've got no clients, or if you've got clients but you can't pay for your life, it's not going to last very long, and you're not going to be able to help that many people. And you know, so many people that I know, and I imagine you know too, gone into this profession because they really want to do something good with their life. You know, they want to help people, they want to make a difference, they want to make an impact, and the only way you can do that is by doing the work on yourself too. So you can learn all the techniques and the structures and the tools and all of that, sure, and you can do what I did and go and work for sales in 2 years, and you'll probably get a bunch of stuff. But that's not really the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. I really believe that the thing that makes the biggest difference is us doing our own work, and that's, you know, when you do that, if nothing else, it all gets easier. You're going to have way more fun doing it, and you become way more attractive to other people because people see it in you, they feel it in you. You know, when you can look someone in the eye and make them a bold request and do that with total integrity and no neediness, that is like captivating for someone. That's really powerful, and it gives them permission to, that people are like, I want to be able to be like that. You know, I want to have that level of connection and integrity too. So it works on so many levels. So I think if you want to do it and you want to do it well and you really want to make an impact, that's the path.
Wow. Thank you so much for making time today to have the conversation. And if somebody was interested in what you're sharing, or they want to find out more about you or what you do, or they have a question, what is the best way for them to find you or to reach out?
Yeah. Um, First of all, thank you for having me. Good conversation. This I love what you're doing with this series, and I think this in itself is a beautiful act of service to us, to the school, but also to the, you know, whoever watches it, to the industry at large. So very happy to be here and appreciate the invite. You can contact me so my website is my name, which is Nathaniel Dunn, so nathanieldunn.co.uk. I'm also pretty active on Facebook and LinkedIn, and again, it's just my name. So you'll find me on there. Most of my writing, if you just want to hear some ideas and what I'm talking about, I'm publishing pretty regularly on social media, and you can contact me on any of those platforms.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then if anyone is wanting to get a hold of me, jmwhiteman.com, and please let Nathaniel and I know what stood out to you from this conversation, or what did you discover for yourself, because we would absolutely love to hear. And thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you for everyone listening. And I'm excited to see where your journeys unfold. Thank you, guys. And so we'll say bye. Bye.
Bye.